can't believe this is happening.
Yeah! Welcome back to another episode of Staff Inspection. And if you've been following along on the S14 build, you'll know that we put the 1JZ in it, CD09, 3076 on AEM. Got that running on the first episode. Yeah! Woo! Then we took it to Bisimoto. We made over 500 wheel horsepower on the second episode. Oh, okay. And now we're gonna tackle the suspension, the driveline, rear differential, putting a OS Giken limited slip in, and then some other stuff to spice it up, like a hydraulic handbrake, new wheels and tires, better stance. So let's get to it. So we got some KWs, Club Sports. I run these on the M3. I love them. They ride great on the street, but they're super tunable. Gonna run them on the S14. Of course, we had to go with the hydro handbrake. This one's from Chase Bays. Comes with the Willwood Master. Nice handle. So I'm gonna figure out how to mount this on the interior, but still try to keep the center console. And although my Z32 rear brakes actually have a working parking brake, which I've heard is super rare, I really want a hydro because I've never had a drift car before, and it's probably the most fun thing I've ever used, so that's an absolute must for me. So with that, I picked up some used Z32 calipers off a dude off Instagram, and then GK actually makes these really rad brackets. I was having a tough time figuring out how I could run two rear Z32 brakes without having something that pushed the wheel out too far, because a lot of these actually add 12 millimeters to the offset of your wheel because it goes behind the hub. And you have to run like a Mustang rotor, and then your parking brake doesn't work, which isn't the biggest deal for most people, but I wanted to keep it. So the GK Tech ones are really rad. And then I picked up a bunch of parts from Enjuku, the ISR parts. Andrew over at Enjuku has been a ton of help because I don't really know what the hell I'm doing with S chassis. I'm more of a E-chassis guy, as Hurt would say. We got front tension rods, we got rear control arms, rear traction arms, and solid subframe bushings, along with high rod spacer. Those we're gonna put in as we go, just refresh the arms. These dudes, Team Hang Loose, super rad. They wanted to see if I wanted to run their control arms and their knuckles. I don't want control arms because they're an inch extended, and I'm trying to fit a big wheel under stock modified fenders, so I don't think it would work. These knuckles are dope, mainly because they have a 50 millimeter drop spindle. So what that means is that the spindle is actually 2 inches up further. What that does for your shock is you actually don't have to bottom out your coilover, and you get more stroke on your shock. So you don't have to slam your coilover already all the way down, because you're already getting 2 inches of drop before you're adjusting the collar on your spring. I'm super pumped on that. It also has 50 millimeter roll center correction on your tie rods, which helps your steering angle, so your tie rods aren't pitched all the way up when your car is slammed. So a lot of cool little trick features. I'm gonna get to work. I'm gonna tear this thing down tonight, and then tomorrow I'm gonna start working on the front. Hopefully button that up. I think the front suspension is gonna be pretty easy. And then I just gotta get the rear diff out. So Monday morning, I could drop it off to get rebuilt. And then I think pulling the bushings out of the rear subframe is gonna be a complete nightmare. I'm expecting that. We're gonna get to work. Car still needs a ton of work. Once the suspension stuff's done, I could actually go and smash it, and then I'll worry about how it looks, because although I did pick up a JDM bumper, I still need to get some skirts and a rear bumper. I do have a set of wheels on the way. They're at 3-piece right now, getting refinished. This thing's gonna start looking sick. It's gonna start looking like a car that I actually wanna drive. Pumped. Got the old tension rods out. And you can already see, although this car had aftermarket tension rods, the ISR ones are just so much more beefy. And they actually have this nice like offset right here, because what that's gonna do is it's gonna allow more clearance when your wheel's at full lock. Added benefit. Super thick Heims, adjustable. This stuff kind of feels really old. All right, so we got all the front suspension is off. Old shocks, old tension rods, rotors, which look pretty shot. And when I drove the car real quick after we got off the dyno, the brakes were really awful, and I think it's just because the pads are like 15 years old. These rotors look kind of so I may actually just buy some new pads and rotors while I'm at it, along with new wheel bearings, just so the whole chassis is pretty fresh. So hopefully I can pick these up at the Autos parts store tomorrow. I don't feel like staying here tonight, so I got to sell a part, and I'll come back tomorrow and toss it back together and then move on to the rear. All right, we're back. It's early Saturday morning. We got a rainy day. I had to get started early because last night I found out that my wheel bearings were shot. So I went to AutoZone, picked up some wheel bearings, and there's a place local that's pressing them in. We could get started putting everything back together. Got the coilover in, camber set all the way in. Next up, we're gonna bolt up the hubs, or the knuckles rather. Tension rods, put the tie rods back on, getting the front brake rotors cut also. We'll go back, we'll pick up the rotors and the hubs and new bearings, slap that back in, and we'll be on our way to the back, start pulling out the diff. All right, so we got this all set up, got the knuckle on, coilover in, ball joint set up. Just gotta adjust the tie rod end. It's really all we can do right now while we wait for our hub and our rotor to come back, and then it's just simple, bolt the brake back on, hook up the tie rod, and then all we gotta do, spin that on, get it pretty close to center, and then do the other side. Then the front's all done. I'm gonna go pick up the hubs, slap that back together, and then the front's ready to rock. So we got the car back up in the air, front's all buttoned up and ready to rock. So now we're gonna move to the rear of the car. Most importantly, the diff. This car is a factory open diff, and even though the dude who owned it before had a big turbo SR on it, still open diff. Where you can tell, spin this wheel, the other one spins, not at all. One of the main things I want to get done to this car is put the limited slip in. I picked up an OS Giken, they're like the best in the game. And I'm gonna keep the stock R200 with the 410 gear ratio in it. It might be a little short, but I think it'll be tons of fun. We're gonna drop this thing out, and then those boys are gonna come over here. We're gonna set up the diff, and I wanna change out all the bushings in the subframe. Those don't look fun to do. So I'm gonna drop the entire subframe down, swap them out for solid bushings throughout. Just gonna pull the diff out because it'll be lighter. I'm by myself, so I don't think that pulling the whole subframe out of the diff will be that easy. First up, let's take this diff out. Shout out to Boxo, keeping me organized with this stuff. I think we just need like a 12 extension and a wrench, then pack gun. So we got the diff out. It was actually surprisingly easy. Luckily this car was in Arizona its whole life. None of the bolts were seized, so everything came out super fast. Got this thing out, gonna clean it up, drain it, and then get ready to put the new diff in. All right, good old rainy night to get back to work on the S14. Just gotta pull the rear subframe down. The other day, pulled out the axles, disassembled one of these hubs. I think my plan for this is to just take this apart, disconnect the e-brake cable, and then just drop the whole shit down in one piece. All right, we got this thing out. Bushings look pretty shot. Oh wow, that one's full rip.
Full rip, destroyed.
This thing would have felt sick.
That would have been the most annoying thing, I'm telling you.
What we're gonna be replacing is ditching these rubber bushings with some solid mounts. We just gotta pull all the arms off, pull the hubs off, and then bring this thing to go get bushings pressed out. So yeah, that was super easy. Gonna load this thing in the back of the truck, bring it over to Moto IQ, press out these bushings, get the diff back, and slam this back in, and we'll be ripping by the weekend. All right, so got kicked out of the shop temporarily while they're filming something. So I'm outside wrenching on the subframe right next to a dumpster. Today, I just want to get ready to swing this subframe back in. So we're gonna be swapping out upper control arms, lower traction rods, and then mounting up the dual caliper setup. So switching over to some nice ISR arms, way nicer than this factory stamped steel junk. Gonna pop these things on, set them to stock length. Probably do the upper control arms a little bit shorter, just so I have some additional camber, and then gonna power wash the subframe and pop it back up in the car. Much like the front, I mean, these are the old ones, and you could just feel by the weight. I mean, the ISR arms are way more high quality, and we have no idea how old or what brand these are. They have to be at minimum 10 years old. All right, so we pressed some new bushings in. We got the ISR subframe bushings, GK diff bushings, new arms. So now we just gotta toss this thing back up, and then we're gonna bolt up the hubs, the dual caliper setup, and start getting this thing back together. Hopefully get my diff back in the next couple days, and we'll slam that in, and this thing's ready to rip. right, so we got the GK Tech dual caliper kit in for dual Z32 calipers, and we popped in the subframe, new solid bushings, courtesy of Enjuku, solid diff mounts. And this morning, I went and picked up my diff. I had an OS Giken Superlock installed. It's basically a 1.5 way limited slip. I did that because 1.5 is great, because the lockup isn't super aggressive where it'll get a ton of chatter on the street when you're going in and out of parking lots and making tight radius turns, but it'll still have almost immediate lockup for when you're initiating a drift or going through corners. Gonna toss this thing in, and then I'm just waiting for axle spacers, and then I'll throw the axles in, and then this thing is ready to rock. Let's get this in, run some lines for the handbrake cables, figure out where we're gonna mount the handbrake, and then we'll be jamming. This is definitely the one to get from the hydro all the way to the brake calipers. So it comes up over the differential, and then use the factory handbrake mount. And I actually used some of these ties for heat clamps, and I didn't strap them to it because I don't want to have anything rubbing, but I ran the line above it, just goes right through there. All right, so we got the lines all ran from the brake calipers forward. That's all ran now. Just gotta throw the drive shaft back in, and then mount the handbrake, bench bleed the master, and then this thing should work. All right, best part of the build, getting wheels. So Hurt stopped over at 3-Piece US over in Montclair and picked up a set of wheels I dropped off a while ago, and I'm so pumped to put them on. You know me, I'm kind of known as a Euro car guy, so I didn't want to go a Japanese wheel. So I got a BBS, and it is made in Japan, but it's still got some Euro roots to it. Oh boy. So I got BBS LM, 18x10 plus 20. But I dropped them off the 3-piece. They gave them a little refresh. They polished up the lips real nice, and they actually reverse mounted them, meaning they put the faces on the back. So that drops it down to plus 5. So this is 18x10 plus 5 square. It's got about 3.5-inch lip and a nice hard anodized face. And I might get some JDM red and gold caps, but for now, these things look amazing. I gotta mount some tires and mock these things up real quick. So I got some BFG G-Force, and they're 225/40 square, and it's gonna be a complete nightmare putting them on. So let's go take care of that. So this is stock fenders. I don't even think this car has rolled fenders, and this fits pretty great. I do want to pull some camber out of it because we're at like 5 degrees camber, but this thing just eats up the 18x10. Obviously I got to adjust the ride height in the back, give this a little bit of a pull and a flare, but I think a little bit of camber could solve that issue too, because that's like dead positive, like that's straight up. So now I'm finally pumped. All right, now that the suspension's all dialed in, one last thing I have to do before I drive this thing is set up a catch can, because right now all I have is these two 90s coming off my valve covers. I don't really feel like coating the top of my engine in crankcase vent. So I was watching some of Adam's videos, and I saw that he had this really rad catch can with the panel filter on top, which is exactly what I wanted. Ilaria Motorsport. And this thing is super rad because it fits right in up top here and has brackets that just bolt in right there. Not only does it have individual ports, it also has a drain. And what's cool is like these two top ports come into here, and then there's a baffle, and then this bottom port is underneath the baffle. So I believe it's because you could run this one back into your intake if you want to recirc. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to let it vent to atmosphere. And then you have a drain down here, and it's actually sloped down, so you get all your gross crankcase vent out of there. Super pumped on this thing. It's like exactly what I wanted, because I was thinking about how I could fabricate a catch can to sit here, and it was going to be a real nightmare. So it's nice that these guys actually make a product that just bolts right in. So should be pretty simple. I already have the fittings, so I'm just gonna make some lines, run them over there, mount it up in the corner, and then this thing will be ready to rock. Got this thing all dialed in, AN lines cut and ran. So the catch can, this thing is super rad, bolts in nice down there, and then right up top on the fender well, so super pumped. Yeah. Ooh, got the Hydro handbrake installed. All the titanium bits from Chasing J's. Chase Bay's handbrake. This thing looks friggin' rad. So on the next episode, we'll be working on the exterior and the interior. So we'll do new hood, new trunk, new doors, new seats, set the interior up properly. I'm pumped. I can't wait to get that thing out on track, but just moving it around the parking lot, I realized a lot of things like rubs really bad and needs an alignment, the brakes don't really work. So yeah, still a ton of work to do, but at least the car looks sick, so that's super motivating. So now that my car is officially running and driving, it only means one thing. Brian goes backwards and takes his car more apart.
It was running.
Get this thing done. Take the camera. Go do your thing.
So on today's episode of Car Cane Rehab, wait, that's next week, right?
I have no idea. What am I supposed to say? So if you enjoyed watching videos of me working on my car by myself, guess what? There's more. But there's actually better content on this channel, like Garage and other build shows that we do. And Brian directs Gymkhana, so he does Car Cane Rehab, and he doesn't really do a lot, but he films it better than me. Tune back in, subscribe, like, comment, watch the videos, do the thing, and we'll continue to build cars, because that's the name of the channel. That's it, man. I don't know what else to say.